Week 7 of the fantasy football season. His wide receivers start sit every matchup this week. Denver Broncos at the Saints Thursday Night Football. Cortland Sutton coming off a decent game. I know some of it was garbage time. We had over 50 yards and a touchdown in that loss last week to the Los Angeles Chargers. But Cortland Sutton and Bo Nix the last couple of weeks, they're getting their rapport going. It's Denver Bronco team. Someone needs to catch the football over there. And it's been Cortland Sutton. So this week, I know only a couple teams on bye, and there's 15 games going on. I think Sutton's a flex option. Devon Vile, he's a sit in this one, but it was good to see Vile get back out there on the field. Then he definitely produced 4 catches, 78 yards in that game for the Chargers. So a big wideout is the rookie. We know they need some more weapons in this offense for Denver because the running game's been non-existent for the most part, and they really haven't had that number 2 wideout behind Sutton, but we have to see more to put him in the lineup. Chris Olave, I'm not listing him on this because he's out with a concussion, and I doubt by Thursday he's going to be cleared. So Rashid Shaheed last week, he was operating as the number 1 wideout after Olave went down early in the game with the concussion, and we just didn't see much. If he didn't get that return touchdown with Shaheed, it was going to be a down game. So like I said, Shaheed and Carr, they've had the rapport, but with Spencer Rattler, not many people in this offense are going to be consistent week in and week out. New England Patriots at the Jaguars, another London game this week. The Mario Douglas, 3 out of 4 games, double-digit fantasy points. But I just have to see 1 or 2 more games, especially with Drake May on the center, to have the confidence in Douglas to put him in the lineup. So I know this week it's a good matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars. But like I said, this offense has been inconsistent all season. No doubt about it. May went out there, he put up numbers, but a lot of garbage time as well versus the Houston Texans. So Douglas is sit. Jalen Polk, I thought he was going to have a decent rookie year, but the first 6 weeks of the season, we haven't seen much from Polk. He's an easy sit. Brian Thomas is a start. I know last week it was a down game for everyone in the receiving game besides Gabe Davis for this Jaguar team, where Evan Ingram at the tight end position took a lot of targets and put up a lot of yards with the 10 catches, 102 yards. So Thomas, it was one bad game. Lawrence, obviously more options, and Evan Ingram's always been a favorite of Lawrence, over 100 catches last season. But I still believe in this one. It's a beatable matchup, and Thomas is a start. Christian Kirk a flex. And going back to last season, where obviously Calvin Ridley was healthy when he was on the team, and also Zay Jones was healthy and Evan Ingram. Christian Kirk, his numbers definitely took a hit, and we saw that in last week's ball game. So with a lot of mouths to feed, Kirk at times gets phased out, and the targets and the yards haven't been there. So this week at best, he's a flex option. Gabe Davis, no doubt about it, came off the 5 for 45 and 2 touchdown ball game, but he just disappears, and we know the deal with Gabe Davis. That one big pop game, and then everyone will run out to the waiver wire, add him, and then you put him in the starting lineup, and he gets 4 or 5 fantasy points. So even after a good ball game, I don't believe Gabe Davis is going to do this weekly. Detroit Lions at the Vikings, a great division matchup versus 2 of the best teams in all pro football this season. Amon-Ra St. Brown last week, a quiet week for the most part for his standards, but he had a late touchdown in that 47-9 victory. He's a start. Jameson Williams, 4 out of 5 games this season, double-digit fantasy points, and one of the best deep threats in all pro football. He's a start for me as well. Even though Jameson Williams, he's a boomer bust type of play. If he's not catching that long ball and making a big play, his numbers are going to be down. But this week in Minnesota, I believe it could be a shootout between these 2 teams. He's a start. Justin Jefferson a start each and every week. He's a locked top 3, top 5 option. It doesn't matter the matchup. He's a start. Jordan Addison, a flex option. We saw he returned a few weeks ago versus the Packers. Had 2 touchdowns in that game. And then versus the New York Jets in London, he didn't do much. So in this ball game, I can't put him nothing more than a flex. Tennessee Titans at the Bills. DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley sits. They've pretty much been non-existent in this offense. And I know last week they were decent offensively, but it's pretty much Tony Pollard or nothing, or a random wide receiver like Westbrook-Ikhine or Tyler Boyd at times scoring the touchdowns for this Tennessee Titan team. So Hopkins and Ridley, they just haven't been putting up numbers, and pretty much with a full slate this week in a tougher matchup at Buffalo, there sits Khalil Shakir back on the field. He's a start, number 1 target in this passing game. He's going to make the plays in the seam down the middle. Josh Allen has a good rapport and good trust in Khalil Shakir, so he's a start in this ball game. Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel. Coleman's pretty much 1 or 2 catches a game and a touchdown, or nothing it's been. So he's a huge boomer bust type of play, is Keon Coleman. And this week versus the Tennessee Titans, where their defense for the most part has been pretty decent this season, he's a sit. And Curtis Samuel's been non-existent for the most part this season as well. He's a sit. Miami Dolphins at the Indianapolis Colts, Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, the only players in this offense I would have any confidence in. Jalen Waddle, you see him as a sit here. I don't believe him and Huntley are going to do much in this offense. And also, like I said, the numbers have just dropped off. So Tyreek Hill, he's not an elite wide receiver this season when Huntley's been there for the offense. But I believe after coming off the bye week, more things will be put into play. They'll change the offense to help the strengths of Huntley a little bit and design ways to get Hill open so he's a start. Jalen Waddle is it. Like I said, he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points since week 2, where Tua was still in the lineup for this Dolphins team. And this week, I know the Colts defense ain't all that great, but Jalen Waddle, it's tough to trust him now to the Colts. Pittman, Josh Downs, they've been playing great football since Joe Flacco's been in the starting lineup. That Anthony Richardson's still the starting quarterback. Give Richardson the benefit of the doubt to see if he could get him the football, but I would definitely lower expectations. Alec Pierce is a sit. He's pretty much a deep ball threat and nothing as well as Alec Pierce. And we saw last week 0 fantasy points. And then we saw the week before where Pierce went off in that one in Jacksonville for 134 and a touchdown. So like I said, he's a big boom bust player. He's Pierce. Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons. DK Metcalf last 2 weeks, the numbers have been down, no doubt about it. Under double-digit fantasy points 2 games in a row. But he's a big-time wide receiver. And this week, an unbeatable matchup indoors. Well, I always say I think offense has the advantage in indoor games. I like Metcalf as a start. Jackson Smith-Njigba, I know the targets have gone down a little bit over the last few weeks, but he has a knack for the end zone, and him and Geno Smith definitely have a good rapport. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's a good wide receiver. Definitely a better season so far this year than what he was last year as a rookie, so I'm giving him the nod. Tyler Lockett, he's been a decent flex option, but the thing with Lockett, he's been better at home than he's been on the road. So this week we're being a road game and also a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, including Kenneth Walker out of the backfield. I think Tyler Lockett is a low-end flex option now to the Atlanta Falcons. Drake London the last 2 weeks, he's broken out with some monster ball games, including going back to week 5, 154 yards, a touchdown on 13 grabs in that victory versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And last week, another great game at the Carolina Panthers. So this week in a matchup where the Seahawks secondary on paper is supposed to be good, they've just been getting torched week in and week out. So once again, Drake London a must start. Darnell Mooney a flex option. 2 weeks ago, the big game, 9 for 105 and 2 touchdowns. And then last week, a pedestrian game it was for Darnell Mooney, where he didn't have the eye-popping numbers, but he's a good yard-after-catch player. Him and Kirk Cousins definitely have a good rapport. And this week, he's a flex option as well. Houston Texans at the Packers. Stephon Diggs locked in as the number 1 wide receiver now for this Texan team. When Nico Collins out, multiple more weeks with the hamstring injury season, must start. Tank Dell, a starting option is for me as well. Number 2 wide receiver in this offense, found the end zone last week. Had a nice game versus the Patriots. And we know this could be a potential shootout, even though this Packer defense are creating turnovers and they're holding most opponents to mid-teens, low 20s, but I still believe both receivers could go out there and have good performances. Jaden Reed to start. I know Reed left the game a little bit in last week's matchup versus the Cardinals, but returned and still found the end zone. He's one of the better receivers this season in fantasy football. And this Texan secondary is a little leaky. He's a start. Christian Watson, he's a flex option, especially if Reed isn't 100%. And Watson, he looked pretty good coming off a high ankle sprain, where surprisingly he only missed 1 game. So flex option this week for Christian Watson. He's a deep ball threat. Another boom or bust wide receiver, but one of the quicker wide receivers in the league. Romeo Doubs came off suspension last week, found the end zone twice. I believe Romeo Doubs, he's going to be boom or bust weekly as well, where there's a lot of mouths to feed. And Jordan loves that quarterback that just spreads that football out. And you don't know who weekly besides Jaden Reed is going to get the numbers. So I would sit Doubs this week. Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, their starts each and every week. I know Chase had the down game, only 12.20 fantasy points last week at the Giants. But hey, the Giants went out there. They put it all on the line, played a great game, and his numbers were tampered. And T. Higgins, the last 2 weeks, he's definitely back in this offense. He's definitely healthy. And we know he's on the franchise tag, where he's trying to go out there and obviously be a player that's going to try to put up big numbers and get a big contract either from the Bengals or someone else in the offseason. Now to the Browns, Amari Cooper, he's a flex option this week. Him and Deshaun Watson just haven't been hitting and making plays all season long as Amari Cooper. So this week, I know the matchup is pretty decent on paper, but like I said, Amari Cooper, it's just been a pedestrian season, and it's not all his fault. Only 2 games out of 6 with double-digit fantasy points, and coming off a game last week with 4 for 42, where it was a pretty decent matchup versus the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's nothing more than a number 3 wide receiver. Flex option this week is Amari Cooper. Jerry Jeudy is sit. I know we've seen some flash games from him But pretty much no one in this offense is someone I would have confidence in. So he's a sit this week. Philadelphia Eagles at the Giants. A.J. Brown returned. What a big game. 6 catches, 116 yards. Look healthy, found the end zone. He's a must-start weekly as A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith, he found the end zone as well on a nice 45-yard crossing route. He's a start each and every week. He's going to have some big games and some mediocre games, but Devonta Smith, he's got that monster boom appeal weekly. And this week of the Giant team, I know the secondary played well versus Chase and Higgins. I still believe Devonta Smith and Brown both have great value. Malik Neighbors, hopefully he's back in this one now, off 2 weeks with the concussion, and he was taking the league by storm and was a big-time playmaker for this Giant team. Season must start. Wan'Dale Robinson's definitely carved out a good role and a perfect number 2 wide receiver underneath the route runner as well for this New York Giant team is Wan'Dale Robinson, where at minimum he's going to get 10 fantasy points, I think, for fantasy owners. And we know this Eagles secondary isn't all that great. I know last week they played better, but this Giant offense is more organized, I believe, than that Cleveland Brown offense last week. Vegas Raiders at the Rams. I just can't trust any Vegas Raider player right now besides Brock Bowers. That's about it who I would trust in this Raider offense. Jacoby Myers missed last week's game. I don't know if he's going to return in this week's one. Los Angeles Rams. Well, like I said, Jacoby Myers, he's been up and down all season, and this offense is inconsistent. Also with Devontae Adams, there's a chance he stays and he possibly plays, or there's a chance he gets traded. So it's 50-50 with his situation. So he's a sit. Myers. Trey Tucker a sit. Had a couple pop weeks early in the season, but the last 2 weeks he's been a non-existent. And him and Aiden O'Connell pretty much don't have a rapport, so he's a sit. Cooper Kupp must start. Supposedly he's returning in this game. This was the target date coming off the bye week. And Cooper Kupp, we know, still one of the best route runners. Still some of the best hands in all pro football. He's a must start. DeMarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittington, they're all sits for me. The thing with Whittington, we don't know if he's even going to play. He's coming off injury, getting hurt in that Week 5 ball game was Whittington for this Ram team. And DeMarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, they're definitely going to take a backseat to Kyren Williams. And now Cooper Kupp returning to the lineup where we don't know what their role is going to be. And I just don't believe the targets are going to be there, especially in this game. Cooper Kupp could get open early and often versus Vegas Raider team where they're one of the worst defenses in the league. Carolina Panthers at the Commanders. Deontay Johnson's a start 3 out of 4 games. Since Andy Dalton's been in the starting lineup, he's put up good numbers. And last week, once again, Deontay Johnson over 15-plus fantasy points in PPR leagues. So if it's garbage time or not, in this one, Johnson, he's a good route runner. He's got good hands, and he's been a great PPR player for the most part throughout his NFL career. Xavier Legette sit. I know he found the end zone last week, but the yards were down and the targets were down. This week at Washington, I don't think everyone's going to go in there and have big games. So Legette's definitely someone you should own in 12-team leagues or deeper, but still not someone I would have confidence, especially with pretty much every team playing this week, to put in the lineup. Terry McLaurin, 3 touchdowns on the season. Him and Jaden Daniels definitely have gotten things going since Week 3 in that victory at Cincinnati. And ever since then, McLaurin's taken off, and he's putting up solid numbers. He's a must-start. Up with the Panthers coming to town. Kansas City Chiefs at the Niners Super Bowl rematch. Xavier Worthy, a flex option. They're going to find ways, especially coming off the bye week. Well, I've said this a lot in my videos. Rookies, they get into the playbook more, and they get more involved in offenses. So Xavier Worthy this week, I think he's a decent flex option. He's got that gadget type of play is Xavier Worthy, and he's got that 1 percentile of a speed where I think Andy Reid and this offense are going to find ways to make it easier for Worthy to make play. Juju Smith-Schuster is sitting in this ball game. I know Juju had the big 7 for 130 in that ball game a few weeks ago on Monday night. I just don't believe week in and week out Juju Smith-Schuster is going to go out there and have monster performances. He definitely fits the mold as the number 1 wide receiver in this offense, playing with them a few years ago, and with obviously Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown out for the regular season. So Juju, still a wait-and-see approach, but definitely someone 10-team leagues or deeper I would add. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk starts. Deebo had the nice game last week, 3 catches, 102 yards, 76-yard touchdown in that game. So it looks like he's a little bit healthier as Deebo Samuel. And Brandon Ayuk, this is possibly one of the last chances I would give him an option to be a starting option. 2 weeks ago, the big ball game versus the Cardinals, we went for 8 for 147. And then last week, 5.70 fantasy points in PPR leagues here for Brandon Ayuk. But this week, it's a matchup where this Niner team, you know, they want to have some vengeance after losing the Super Bowl. And they need all hands on deck. And I think they're going to drop back and pass a lot, especially if Jordan Mason's possibly out in this game. Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers, Garrett Wilson a start. Him and Aaron Rodgers is starting to get things going in this offense. I know it's a tough matchup at the Pittsburgh Steelers team, one of the better offenses in all pro football, especially with Micah Fitzpatrick back there in the secondary. But Garrett Wilson, he was a late first, early second rounder, and now we've seen the numbers over the last few weeks go up for him. Alan Lazard, a flex option. I know Lazard, he's amongst the league leaders in drops this season, but him and Aaron Rodgers just have that rapport. We're in the red zone. He trusts Alan Lazard, and we've seen Lazard find the end zone already this season a few times. So Lazard, like I said, the numbers aren't going to be great, and it's not a high ceiling for him, but definitely someone that Aaron Rodgers trusts, and he's a flex option for me this week. Mike Williams a sit in this one. We just haven't seen enough consistency from Mike Williams week in and week out. Still not 100%, obviously, as well, coming off the ACL injury, but he's a talented wide receiver, and maybe as the season gets into the second half more, he could have fantasy value, but he's a sit. George Pickens a flex. Just the numbers haven't been there for Pickens. This is a run-first offense for this Pittsburgh Steelers team, and playing good defense has been the formula. And now Justin Fields, the last couple games, he's running the football a little bit more. And last week as well, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. So with Fields running the football more, and Najee Harris looking good the last couple weeks. George Pickens has been phased out a little bit. And we even saw it going back a couple weeks ago versus the Dallas Cowboys. He was on like a snap count or whatever the case may be in that one. And last week he didn't do much in that ball game, failing to reach double digits in the victory of Vegas. Now Monday night, the first of 2 games, Baltimore Ravens at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I believe this is going to be a shootout between 2 great offenses. Zay Flowers last week, another big performance in that one, 9 for 132. So 2 games in a row over 100 yards. He's a start with this Tampa secondary isn't all that great. Rashad Bateman, he's definitely been on the fantasy radar, but he's not someone I would have 100% confidence in. And like I said, only a couple teams on bye, so Bateman's not really going to see the starting lineup. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, these are top 10 wide receivers this season. They're locked in. These guys with Baker Mayfield are making big plays. And Chris Godwin last week coming off a 30-plus point fantasy game, finding the end zone twice in that one. He's running all the routes. He looks 100% healthy after 2 seasons off the ACL. And Mike Evans, we know he's a deep ball threat. We know he can run all the routes. We know he can burn in the secondary. And him and Baker have been hitting the last 2 seasons. He's a start. Final game of the week on Monday night, Chargers at the Cardinals. Lam McConkey, he's pretty much the only guy I would have any confidence in this passing game for this Charger team. So he's a flex option. He's a good route runner. Him and Herbert definitely have a good rapport. And last week we saw some good yard after catch work from McConkey. He's a flex. Quentin Johnston, he got banged up a little bit with the ankle in last week's game. I know he returned. Didn't really have much of an impact. And I know it's a good matchup at the Cardinals, but still, these guys are tough to trust. We're pretty much a full slate. Marvin Harrison is start. We'll see if he's going to play in this game off the concussion, but he does get an extra days of rest here. Is Marvin Harrison with this ball game being on Monday nights? I know Harrison, it's been up and down for him so far in his rookie season, but we know he's got the number 1 wide receiver potential. We've seen a couple big games, and he carries himself as the number 1 wide receiver, and defenses roll their coverage his way. Michael Wilson is sit. I know Wilson's had some decent ball games this season, and last week he found the end zone for this Arizona Cardinal team, but I believe we have to see more out of Michael Wilson, and if Harrison's back in the lineup, he's down to that 3rd or 4th option in the offense behind Harrison, behind Trey McBride, and behind James Conner in the backfield. So that's wide receiver start sit every matchup for Week 7 of the fantasy football season.